Is it part of ADHD? How often have you heard the question or wondered whether something is part of ADHD? If you're like me, member of a lot of groups in Facebook or since a while there, you always hear the question, is it part of ADHD too? Is part of ADHD to feel rejected in groups? Is part of ADHD to have a really difficult time with paperwork? Is it part of ADHD that you can't get maths? Is it part of ADHD that you feel rejected? Is it part of ADHD that you think about sex all the time? Is it part of ADHD that you have really difficulty to connect with people, to find a partner? Is it part of ADHD to constantly scrub yourself? Is it part of ADHD that as soon as you sort your room, it gets messy again? Is it part of ADHD? Almost always, it's a yes. Everything in our behaviors, in what we're doing, it can be part of ADHD. I asked myself the other time, I have an eye condition, which is called the chronatoconus. And this eye condition, I looked it up whether there's anything related to ADHD, and there is a case study that a boy who was constantly rubbing their eyes developed this eye condition. All we experience can be part of ADHD because I experience personally ADHD as an amplifier for my behavior. So every behavior is related to it. And when we have a certain condition, a symptom, we either need more of something or less of something. So what happens when we have ADHD? Our dopamine is inconsistent. Our body craves for reward. So we go for where the reward is without considering the consequences. As of that, we live more on the edge, we are more extreme, and everything can be part of that behavior. We are also distracted because something is stronger of an impulse. The dopamine is there and there is a boring lecture. So where do you go? This is all part of ADHD. Like with the norepinephrine, the noradrenaline, like in the body, the excitement, the adrenaline in the mind. Of course it is. And how we execute our behaviors. We couldn't hold a thought back. We couldn't hold an action back. All of that is part of ADHD. Not all of that have the same treatment. And I personally believe it is very individual how to address something. For myself as a coach, I inspire and help people to live their best self. So I'm curious of how do you deal with that? What happens if you develop that actions? What are 3 better choices to engage in that behavior? How can you bring these 3 better choices in a practice? This is what my ADHD coaching is about. I let people feel things in the body, step in, discover. As an ADHD coach, I come across these experiences that literally everything is triggered by ADHD or of ADHD. So on certain things, there are more trends, there are more case studies than on other things. But when you observe things, when you look at what is at the root, this can be the mind stuff, the engagement, the amplification, the restlessness of mind, and everything is out of that. If we are like one day very excited and the other day very miserable, which in a chronic term is something like bipolar representation. It can be that ADHD sits on the root of it. Nevertheless, as everything is ADHD, how can we find what we need? How can we find the mental balance? How can we find the practice? How can we get the motivation? And maybe even more important, how to maintain the motivation, how to develop a consistent practice. And answers to that, they're very individual. That's why I'm so convinced that coaching is the ultimate resource. And there can be self-coaching done. I have a lot of that to offer in that regard, like doing one-to-one coaching online. I have this self-learning ADHD mini course, as well as the free resources like the Facebook group. So come join that, find out, engage, let me know what you think about, and ask the questions. But as I said, almost everything is part of ADHD. If you like this video, share it with someone who may benefit from it. Share it with someone who needs to know that. And like this video and share it, please.